Well, good evening, everyone. I'll introduce myself. My name is Don Ettinger. I work for Goral Palmer. We're based in South Portland. We've been the lead consultant on a planning study here in the city of Auburn, and we're here tonight to present our second public meeting. I will share my screen. See if I grab the right one. I think it's this one. Let's see what happens. All right. Did I flip a page for you guys? Did you guys see it flip a page? No.
I see
All right.
page one.
Okay, you don't see page two. Let's stop sharing. All right, let's try this again.
It looked like you
Yes.
opened it, but maybe the slideshow didn't start.
Okay, let's try this guy. All right, so you should see page one, page two with study team. Are you guys seeing that?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. All right, so we'll get started tonight. We're here to present our second public meeting on this transportation planning study. It is worth noting that we've had some neighborhood meetings on a kind of a twin study that's been ongoing related to land use in the Washington Street corridor. So this isn't the second meeting overall, but the second one related to our transportation study. So we'll get started with introducing our study team. So I've already introduced myself. I represent Goral Palmer here. We're the kind of the lead consultant on this, focused heavily on traffic and transportation related aspects of this study. We teamed with North Star Planning. Ben Smith is here on the call, and he'll be presenting in the presentation as well. Ben is focused on all things land use planning related. We've also teamed with Aceto Landscape Architects, and Grace McNeil is with us tonight to present on some of the slides as it relates to kind of visualizing what the corridor might look like in a build condition. We have actually a client team comprised of three different entities. First, the MPO is ATRC, and that is who our contract is direct with. Larry Allen is present on the call tonight and represents ATRC. From the municipality standpoint, the City of Auburn and Eric Cousins has been involved from start to where we are today on this study. And we also have a representation from Maine DOT. Claire Winter is here representing the planning aspect for Maine DOT. So what we'd like to do as I kind of transition into these slides, we have a presentation that we'd like to walk through for the audience. It is probably 40 slides long, so 40 minutes long probably to get through. We're hoping that you guys could just stay attentive and kind of hear what we have to present. But when we finish that, we certainly will open it up to questions and responses. So we're hoping we get some feedback from the folks that are on the call. We also, I think, Eric might be managing writing questions. If you have questions through this Zoom meeting, you might be able to submit those. We probably won't answer them until we get through the presentation. All right. So first want to discuss our study limits for this. So the graphic on the right kind of illustrates where we are. So hopefully not Ben or Grace, can you nod your head if you see my cursor moving on the screen? Perfect. Okay, thank you. So to give everybody a bearing, this is I-95 or the Maine Turnpike here. This is exit 75 on the bottom of the graphic. Our study begins just north of exit 75, right at Allied Road, and where the park and ride is. And we continue north all the way up to the Minot Ave Rotary, where Roy's Burger is located. So we'll be continuing all the way up there. We'll be considering both the northbound and southbound barrels of Washington Street or Route 202 through this area. And the overall length is just shy of 4 miles. So pretty lengthy study. The next two slides, we have a lot of text here, but hopefully as we move forward, it'll be more visual graphics. So what's the purpose and need and goals and outcomes of this study? So what we've been kind of assigned to look at is try to maintain mobility between the downtown Auburn area and Interstate 95 and the Maine Turnpike. We understand it's a heavy commuter route. We also understand that the access from the interstate to Lewiston and Auburn is just not important, but it's points north. I think Farmington and other points will travel through this corridor. But what we want to do is try to provide improved safety and accessibility for properties and businesses that exist along the original northbound section of Washington Street. You'll notice driving through there, the characteristics of both the northbound and southbound barrels are drastically different. A lot of residential, industrial, and commercial businesses that exist on the northbound corridor. The southbound corridor is limited access with really no businesses along that section. Also, another goal of ours is to provide accommodations for all transportation modes, including bikes, pedestrians, and transit along that northbound section of Washington Street. Provide for a limited access facility or maintain the limited access facility that focuses on vehicles and trucks on that southbound corridor of Washington Street. And look at safety, access, and mobility along both of those corridors. So diving a bit deeper into the discussion, what are we looking to do? So we want to identify improvements that may be necessary to convert both the northbound and southbound roadway sections of Washington Street into two-lane, two-way roadways. So right now we have two corridors, 2 lanes in each direction, but they're separated facilities and they're one direction. So you have 2 lanes northbound, 2 lanes southbound. We want to introduce bidirectional traffic. So, and the northbound corridor, we want to introduce a 2-way traffic, 1 lane in each direction. In the mobility corridor, which is currently the southbound corridor, we want to introduce similarly 2-way traffic, at least 1 lane in each direction. Do we need 2 lanes or a hybrid section, something between 1 and 2 lanes? So we want to convert, we want to keep the southbound corridor of Washington Street as a controlled access highway, convert it to 2-way traffic. We want to convert the current northbound portion of Washington Street back to a local street. That's what it was at one time years ago. We want to introduce lower speeds on that northbound corridor, better access to the adjacent parcels, and accommodations for all modes, bikes, peds, and transit. So we want to kind of convert the northbound into more of a local street and the southbound corridor into our mobility corridor. We're going to determine the length of time that this new controlled access highway on that southbound corridor will operate at acceptable levels of service. How long can we do just 1 lane in each direction? When do we need to consider a hybrid or 2 lanes in each direction along that corridor? We're going to provide for 3 connection points between those 2 corridors. And we'll talk further in the slides as to where those locations are. And also we want to look at a Rodman Road connection to Broad Street. That currently does not exist, but we're looking at maybe east-west connection across Washington Street to provide connections to Broad Street and potential future residential development in that Broad Street area. I guess I will note on that Broad Street connection that it will require a crossing of the Little Androscoggin River, as well as a active railroad corridor in that area. So that was in narrative form, what our scope is. This is more in graphical form, what we're looking to do. So this is our existing condition. We flipped the screen a little bit. North is to the right of the page. So I-95 is located here. Exit 75 is on the left-hand side of our screen. And then the Route 202 or Washington Street corridor goes left to right on our page. City of Auburn proper is located on the right-hand side of the page. So in the existing condition, we have one-way traffic in the northbound direction and a separated facility for one-way traffic in the southbound direction. There is a Rodman Road connection to that southbound corridor, but not a direct connection to the northbound corridor. In the future condition, what we're looking to do is to take that northbound corridor of Washington Street and make it a local street. Lower speeds, more accommodations for bikes and peds, make it more user-friendly for the businesses that exist along the corridor and the residential properties. And then on that southbound corridor, maintain that as our mobility corridor, but provide for two-way traffic. We maintain a connection to Rodman Road, but we'd like to introduce a new connection all the way across to Broad Street, crossing the Little Androscoggin. Okay, so let's jump into some of the information that we gathered as we have been working on this planning study. So first thing first, roadway conditions. So it's a divided highway in the existing condition. There's 2 lanes in each direction. It's a corridor priority 1 roadway. DOT prioritizes roadways, I think, from 1 to 5. A 1 is the highest priority. These would be the interstate system or major arterials. Priority 5 would be a local street. So in this case here, this is a high priority corridor. It's a principal arterial. It has just shy of 20,000 cars a day. So a lot of traffic on the corridor. Has relatively high speeds through this corridor with average speed limits anywhere from 45 to 55 miles an hour. The southbound corridor is limited access. So the photo on the bottom right here represents our southbound corridor. You'll see it's all wooded. No development exists through here. Whereas the photo on the top right shows our northbound corridor with businesses that exist along the corridor. All right. One aspect that we like to look at in these planning studies is a safety review. Do we have any locations that are dangerous or considered high crash locations? Do we have either intersections or nodes that have higher than normal crashes or accidents? So we looked at the whole corridor and looking at high crash locations. I'll give you a definition of what high crash location means. It's having 8 or more crashes in a 3-year period and a critical rate factor of 1.0 or greater. What is the critical rate factor? The best way I describe it is it compares the severity and the types of crashes at this location to other intersections throughout the state, and then it ranks them. So if it's 1.0 or better or higher, that will also be a trip category that needs to be met to be considered a high crash location. So we have one location within the corridor that's a high crash location, and this is for years 2021 through 2023. That's our 3-year period. It's Washington Street intersection with Beach Hill and Danville Corner Road. 17 crashes in that 3-year period with a critical rate factor of 2.79. So this intersection is actually, there is mitigation ongoing for this intersection. A traffic signal is planned and in design as we speak. So the graphics, when we present our concepts to you, will show that we're showing a signalized intersection at this location. It is also worth noting that the intersection south of our study limits, the exit 75 intersection with the Maine Turnpike, as well as the Kitty Hawk intersection with Washington and Route 202. Those both are high crash locations, but outside our study limits. All right. This graphic here may be hard to see on the screen, but this is a speed data graphic. So ATRC was kind enough to help us out in this study, and they have a speed counter, so they can go out. It's either a camera or a counter. They can go out and collect speeds of vehicles. So they set their camera out at 5 different locations along this corridor. And collected a ton of traffic data for every vehicle that crossed through this area. And what we found, generally speaking, is speed of traffic is higher than the posted speed throughout the corridor. Some of it's quite a bit higher, but generally speaking, we mentioned speed limits are 45 to 50 to 55, and we're finding speeds in excess of that on average for the daily traffic. All right, so we're going to transition. We talked a little bit about safety. We're transitioning into traffic as it relates to safety. I'll start with the graphic on the right here and share with you again. We've rotated a little bit, so this is north-south for Washington Street. So this is our Washington Street corridor. City proper for Auburn is on the top of the graphic. Maine Turnpike exit 75 is on the bottom graphic. So we have some circles here in colors. I wanted to explain what those are. The first one, the red circle, is the signalized intersection with exit 75, just slightly outside our study limits. The green circle that you see here is the proposed signalized intersection with Danville Corner Road and Beach Hill. And then we have 3 pink circles. This represents the 3 locations where we're providing connections between our 2 Washington Street corridors, the local street and this mobility corridor. So we call the bottom pink circle would be our southern split. The top one would be our northern split, or where they merge back together. And then in the middle is right at Rodman Road, where we have that connection today. So through this area, one thing we wanted to focus in on is on that mobility corridor. We wanted to understand levels of service and capacity based on different options and footprints. The other thing we wanted to determine was travel time. As it relates to mobility, some of the comments we received from our first public meeting was, hey, whatever you do here, don't impact our commute, our daily commute getting down here. So we wanted to understand what impact the concepts that we're developing would have on commuter time. And then we also wanted to understand safety as it relates to our mobility corridor. Currently, it's a divided facility, so you have 2 lanes in one direction, northbound, 2 lanes in one direction, southbound. With this idea and vision that we're looking to incorporate, we're introducing two-way traffic, particularly on the mobility corridor. That will increase the chances of head-on collisions. So from a safety standpoint, what considerations can we make in the design to minimize or potentially eliminate that risk of head-on collisions? So we have a slide on our thoughts there. So we've analyzed 3 different options as it relates to a footprint for the mobility corridor. The first option is just a 2-lane section, 1 lane in each direction. We understand that's different than what you have today. You have 2 lanes. So we actually modeled how well does that operate from a levels of service delay aspect if we just provide 1 lane in each direction. The second option we developed was similarly 1 lane in each direction, but we made improvements at each of the 3 intersections, those pink circles, to add additional capacity to improve our operations and levels of service. And then we also came up with a 3-lane section or a hybrid section. We modeled that as well. I'll explain what that consists of. Basically, at the 3 circles that we have shown here at our 3 intersections, we're proposing all 3 of those to be signalized intersections. And then on approach and departure of those intersections, we're proposing basically 2 lanes. So as you come into the intersection or exit the intersection, you have 2 acceleration lanes for about 1,500 feet. So basically that allows you time to accelerate and pass the slower moving traffic before you have to merge into a single lane. So we kind of modeled what we call a 3-lane section for the corridor to see what that told us for information. So we'll jump to the results of our traffic analysis and modeling. So as I've described each of the options, so what we found here was we have pretty good levels of service, even with a 2-lane section, 1 lane in each direction through here. So option 1 is just a single lane in each direction. You'll see levels of service B, D, and B. Those represent the 3 pink circles. So going from south to north, the southern split had a level of service B. The Rodman Road intersection had a level of service D. The northern split had a level of service B. When we add intersection improvements, which is option 2, we found that we improved our level of service results, particularly at the Rodman Road intersection. And then when we added that 3-lane section or modeled that 3-lane section, we found that we had even better results. So we have levels of service B and A on those in the AM and PM condition. So what did this tell us? This told us we did not need to model for a 4-lane section through this corridor because we found a 2-lane or 3-lane section provided acceptable results. Of the 3 options, we found option 3, which was our 3-lane section, gave us the best level of service results and the lowest delays. So that's just one aspect or one part of the big picture. The next part is mobility and travel time. So we wanted to digest this and understand this because we felt this would be important for the public to hear and understand what impacts this might have on the mobility corridor. So what we ended up doing, this graphic here shows that we took a look at the existing condition, which is no signals, free flow through the corridor, and then we modeled and analyzed option 1, 2, and 3 with the traffic signals. We looked at northbound and southbound in the AM condition. We looked at northbound and southbound in the PM condition. What we found in the existing condition to travel through our study area, which is at 3 to 4 miles, we found it takes generally 3 to 4 minutes to travel through in the existing condition. When you look at options 1, 2, and 3 that we're proposing with the signalized intersections, we found that we add about a minute of travel time. So instead of 3 to 4 minutes, it's 4 to 5 minutes. Of the options we looked at, we found option 3, which was that 3-lane section, gave us our best results in looking at that. So And this was for year 2050. So this is not just opening day. We're forecasting out 25 years with growth factors in traffic volumes, as well as anticipated new development that may occur over the next 25 years in the area. So this is a future anticipation on travel time. Then the third component we wanted to look at on this mobility corridor was how do we improve on this, making it as safe as possible for two-way traffic and minimizing head-on collisions. So the graphics you see here kind of illustrate what our recommendations are for this corridor is to introduce not just a center line, but basically a striped center median to be at least 4 feet wide, maybe 6 feet in width. To separate the northbound and southbound traffic by a striped median. We did consider a raised median or a big divided median. We felt that this was, from a cost standpoint, this was a cost-effective solution to minimize the concerns. You'll see the graphic here on the left illustrates this striped center median. It actually has some delineator posts shown here. Not sure we would need that on our project. This does show rumble strips on both stripe lines, and we would recommend that as well in this study that we do a rumble strip. So the idea behind it is a complacent driver that might slightly traverse over the center line stripe would be made aware of that they're traversing over by a rumble strip. Plus, there's going to be a 4-foot buffer before they're even encroaching into the opposing lane of traffic. So the graphic, the photo on the right is actually in Portland. This is Veterans Memorial Bridge. And they did introduce something very similar there where they have a striped center median with rumble strips. All right. So now we're going to transition to a discussion on our preliminary recommendations and concepts. So we have a lot to present through here, and I apologize if it's lengthy and time consuming, but there, like I said, there's a lot here to present what we have. So what I will share with you on this graphic here, north is to our right. Maine Turnpike, Interstate 95 is located here. Exit 75 is here where my cursor is. And we're going to go from left to right on the corridor from south to north. So we're going to start down near the Maine Turnpike, and we're going to work our way northward into the city of Auburn. We have actually, I'll say, 4 different sections, actually 5 different sections. We're going to use these terms, a southern boulevard. We have a southern boulevard down near the Turnpike. We have a northern boulevard up near the city of Auburn proper, near the Minot Ave Rotary. We're going to have a mobility corridor, which is our higher speed facility. We're also going to have a local street for Washington Street. And then we're going to be discussing a Rodman Road Broad Street connector as well that runs east and west on our corridor. So with that said, we'll jump into the slides here. And at a high level, I'll discuss what preliminary recommendations we're making for the corridor, starting from south to north. So here we're at the Southern Boulevard. If you can see my cursor, this is the park and ride facility at exit 75. Allied Road is located here, so the next signal is just off our page on the left. As you travel north, what we're proposing for our Southern Boulevard is a 4-lane section, 2 lanes northbound, 2 lanes southbound, with it separated by a landscaped median, not too different than what you have out there today. But we're going to introduce bicycle and pedestrian accommodations with separated facilities. So we don't want the bikes and the peds interacting with the vehicles through this corridor. Anybody that drives it knows it's pretty high volume and can be high speed. So we're proposing separated facilities for bikes and peds. We'll start at the top here from the park and ride. We see that park and ride as a potential trailhead for accessing the shared use pathway. So we're proposing a 10-foot shared use pathway from the park and ride running along the west side of the Washington Street corridor. That shared use pathway will continue up to the signalized intersection with Danville Corner Road. On the bottom side of the graphic, or on the east side of our graphic, we're also proposing a shared use pathway for bikes and peds, 10-foot wide, paved. It will continue down to Allied Road and terminate at Allied Road. We are aware that the state and the city of Portland are embarking on a Casco Bay Trail, potentially from Portland up to Danville Junction. If that's successful, then there'll be about a 1 mile gap between Danville Junction and Allied Road to connect a trail system from the city of Auburn all the way to the city of Portland, which would be fantastic. This shared use trail system that we're proposing on this corridor will continue through the whole corridor all the way up to the Minot Ave Minot Ave Rotary. There will be a section on the local street where we transition from a shared use trail to separated bike facilities. So you'll see that in our graphics. From a vehicle standpoint, we are proposing 2 safety changes along this section here on the slides. First is at Allied Road. Allied Road is unsignalized and provides for full access, including left turns coming out of the facility, left turns coming out, and left turns turning in. Anybody that's watched this intersection, it's pretty dangerous for the large trucks to come in and out of here in an unsignalized intersection. So we're proposing to extend the center median through Allied Road and restrict any left turn movements. You'll see later in our slideshow presentation where we're proposing different access points to Washington Street for Allied Road. Similarly, the next intersection as you travel north underneath the Turnpike Bridge, the next intersection is East Hardscrabble Road. This is unsignalized, full access with a small left turn pocket here to turn left into it in the northbound direction. They do allow lefts coming out. There are sightline issues with this location. The bridge piers impact sight lines coming out of East Hardscrabble. The bridge piers also impact the ability to have a proper length left turn pocket. So as a result of those concerns, we're proposing to terminate left turn movements at East Hardscrabble and provide a center median through there. So we'll be right in and right out at East Hardscrabble. Folks that typically use that road will need to continue up to the next intersection, which will be signalized, and they can turn there at Beach Hill. They also, coming off at exit 75, they could turn right and head down to Kitty Hawk to the south to get access to Hotel Road. All right, we're going to continue north. As we continue north through the corridor, the footprint for this boulevard stays the same. 2 lanes northbound, 2 lanes southbound, a landscape center median, curbing on both sides with shared use pathways, separated shared use pathways on both sides. As we come to the Beach Hill Road intersection with Danville Corner Road, this is the high crash location. We are showing a proposed signal here, which will be, I believe, implemented as early as this summer or next summer as a construction project where they'll be signalizing that. At this location, we're providing for full pedestrian and bicycle accommodations here with crosswalks. And this is where we'll terminate the shared use pathway on the west side of Washington Street. So we'll come up here and then the pathway will continue on the south side or the bottom of the page, and that will continue all the way up to the local street. All right, we're going to continue north. As we continue north up the Southern Boulevard on Washington Street, we come to a signalized intersection here. This is where we call our southern split. This is where currently the northbound and southbound sections of Washington Street diverge and separate. What we're proposing here is to do a 3-way signalized intersection with the local street, which is the current northbound corridor, tying into the mobility corridor. So the through movement will be our mobility corridor. You'll have to think about turning right or left to go into the local street. Pedestrian and bicycle accommodations will continue up to the limits of our Southern Boulevard. We'll have a crosswalk here, and then all bike and ped accommodations would continue down the local street and not on our mobility corridor heading north. All right, we're going to continue to the next slide. And actually, this is a visual of this intersection. I'm going to hand it over to Grace to talk about what we're looking at.
Thanks, Don. So as you can see, this is a perspective image taken from the point of view heading north at that southern split intersection that we were just looking at. So we're in the northbound lane. You can see the southbound lanes on the left side. Between the 2 lanes, we have that nice size planted median with some street trees and planting just to kind of break up the roadways there. Right in the front, you can see the intersection signalized. We've got crosswalks going across, and then all the way on the right, we have another planted median that would include some other street trees as well as some pedestrian scale lighting, and then our 10-foot shared use path to accommodate both bicycle traffic and pedestrian traffic.
Thank you, Grace. And I would build on what Grace has said. So any place on our design where we're proposing a shared use pathway, we'll be proposing not only landscaping with an esplanade, but also that pedestrian scale lighting. So you'll see that kind of throughout our study limits. Okay, so we're going to continue north. We've kind of flipped a little bit, but this is our three-way intersection that Grace just described. North is left to right on our page. So this is now our mobility corridor. And as I described earlier with our different options, option 3, which we think is the best option for moving forward with study recommendations, shows 2 lanes coming into the intersection, 2 lanes exiting the intersection in a northbound direction. Those 2 lanes will stay there for 1,500 feet. That is probably a quarter of a mile in length. Should be plenty of time to accelerate, pass slower moving vehicles before we taper those 2 lanes into a single lane as we continue north. And then you'll see here the yellow represents our striped median that we talked about introducing through that mobility corridor. You'll see green here at the intersections. We flared out and we have some landscape islands approaching each of those 3 signalized intersections. As we transition down to the local street, so this is our local street here. We're proposing single lane, 11-foot lanes, 1 lane northbound, 1 lane southbound, curbing on both sides, and the shared use pathway separated as a separated facility on the east side of the corridor. And that will continue all the way across the Little Androscoggin River. So this will be this local street will be where we want all of our bikes and pedestrians to go. We want this to be lower speed. Our commuter traffic, we want them to stay up on this mobility corridor. All right, we'll continue further north. This is the Little Androscoggin River. There are 2 bridge crossings, one for Washington Street northbound, one for Washington Street southbound. You'll see our mobility corridor does taper from 2 lanes down to 1 in the northbound direction. We have a single lane in each direction at the bridge on our mobility corridor. We are going to need to widen that bridge to accommodate that center striped median. There's just not enough curb to curb width on the bridge to accommodate the new footprints. So there will be some widening of that existing bridge to accommodate those needs. I will mention Chase Street is located here. It currently connects to the southbound corridor. One thing in the recommendations of our study will be we're going to kind of eliminate connections with that mobility corridor. So there are more than 3 connections today. We're going to limit it to just 3. All of the other streets will terminate on the high side where it's near the mobility corridor, but they'll provide for full access on the local street. The template for the local street, which is shown on the bottom of our view, it continues with the same theme. 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction, a 5-foot shoulder with curbing, and then we have a shared use pathway separated from the road on the bottom or the east side of the corridor. If we continue further north, we cross the Little Androscoggin here. Our template for the mobility corridor is pretty consistent, 1 lane in each direction. You'll see on the right-hand side, we actually have a 3-lane section. That's because we have 2 lanes coming out of the Rodman Road intersection or traffic signal heading southbound. We start to introduce some changes on the local street once we transition over the Little Androscoggin. So speed limits, we're thinking on the local street will probably be 35 miles an hour from that southern split to the Little Androscoggin. Once you cross over the Little Androscoggin, we transition it down to 25 miles an hour, much more of an urban setting. And then we're going to start changing our roadway template. So once we get over the bridge, we will start introducing some crosswalks and some stronger facilities for bikes and pedestrians. So with a lower speed, and we want traffic calming through this section, we're going to introduce all crosswalks will be raised crosswalks. So we'll introduce vertical traffic calming, and you'll see those are strategically placed along the corridor. And then at our first crosswalk, we're going to eliminate the shared use path, and we're going to introduce sidewalks and bike lanes both sides of the Washington Street local street from this point heading into our kind of what I'll call our city center as it relates to the Washington Street corridor. So bike and pedestrian facilities, both sides of the street, curbing, 11-foot travel lanes, narrow shoulders, I think maybe 3-foot shoulders, and then a wide esplanade. The esplanade is wide enough that we can accommodate future on-street parking as development occurs through the corridor. As we continue north, we get to what I'll call our city center area for the local street. This would be our hub for land use development, future land use development, or redevelopment. You'll see on the top of the page, we have our mobility corridor connecting to a Rodman Road intersection that will be signalized. You'll see we have multiple lanes traveling through on the mobility corridor to make sure commuter traffic gets through these in efficient time. On the local street, we have a similar template that I mentioned in the prior slide. Up to a certain point, about 2 blocks away from what we call our city center, we're going to introduce on-street parking. So we still have sidewalks on both sides, bike lanes, likely going to be up with the sidewalk. Grace has some visuals to share with you, the 2 options we're looking at. We'll have curb extensions at each of the crosswalks with vertical raised crosswalks to introduce traffic calming through the corridor. When we get to the urban center here, this will be a new intersection with the local street and a Broad Street connector. We're proposing an all-way stop at that location. So all traffic on all approaches will have a stop condition. And then we'll continue down. There's a connection here that will between the mobility and the local street. We'll talk about that and some slides later in the presentation. I think my next slide here will transition to some slides, some visuals that Grace can discuss as it relates to the local street. So, Grace, I'll give it to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so basically, as Don said, we have 2 different versions that we're looking at applying the bike lane and the sidewalks in this local street in this like sort of downtown city center, town center area that we're talking about. This is version A. That the most notable difference is that the sidewalk and the bike lane are separated by a planted median. Again, you can see our pedestrian scale lighting, medians with street trees. This option doesn't allow the larger street trees that you might see in like a town center setting due to the proximity of the buildings. Is that right, Don?
Yeah, and I think the closeness to the travel lanes.
Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Yep.
And you can see further down that these like more interior medians become the street parking further down. And then we've got our 2 travel lanes, and in the center there are raised crosswalk. The next graphic will kind of break up the view a little bit so you can see the differences a little bit better. So we've got on the left, our future infill. I also want to say the reason you're seeing those kind of amorphous white buildings along the edge there are because we're talking about in this study what we call a complete street, and that includes infill, which would be great to see in this area. I think Ben will talk a little bit later about what that might look like, but we're including them in these graphics so that you get an idea of what this street would look like when it's totally finished and functioning as a complete street. So this section breaks up the orientation of the street a little better to see. Starting on the left with our potential future infill buildings, we've got our 6-foot sidewalk, a 3-foot planted median that would include that pedestrian scale lighting I'm talking about, our a 5-foot bike lane that is also raised at the same level as a sidewalk, the 8-foot median, and also just you can't see in this section, but further down does include that street parking as well in that same area. Our 6-inch curb, then we've got our 11-foot travel lanes, and then the same thing on the other side of the street. So that's version A. This is version B, which the biggest difference is that the bike lane and the sidewalk are together on the same plane. And there's a lot of different ways to delineate the lanes of travel there between the bike lane and the sidewalk. We've chosen to do it with a material change. So looking at the sidewalk being this like brick paving material and the bike lane being asphalt, the same as the street. It can be as simple as just kind of painting symbols on the ground plane as well. So there's lots of different ways to make that happen. And then another difference here is we've got one larger planted median here that is a little bit, we can have these larger street trees in this option. And again, in that same median, continuing with the pedestrian scale lighting that would help both the bike lane and the sidewalk area. And same thing, we're showing these potential future buildings here. And then in the section, the next graphic, we can see again the breakdown of these different lanes a little bit more easily. So starting from the left, we have our potential future infill buildings here. Then on the same plane, the 6-foot sidewalk and 5-foot bike lane, all one surface essentially. And then the 3-foot wide planted median that can accommodate some larger trees here due to the orientation with the travel lanes. Our 6-foot curb, and then we have the 8-foot on-street parking and our 11-foot travel lanes, and then same thing happening on the right side.
Thank you, Grace. So what I will say is our earlier concepts as we developed them, I think we were showing concept or version A, something like this. The graphics we're presenting tonight, we flipped it and we're starting to show version B. So we still need to kind of do a cost comparison, not a cost comparison, but an evaluation between the two options, advantages and disadvantages, before making a final recommendation on which one to proceed with. All right, so we'll continue further. So this is I'll call it our city center, town center area. We're continuing north from the Rodman Road area. Here, actually, if you can see my cursor, this is the existing intersection with Rodman Road. This over here is the existing Miami Ave connection to that southbound corridor. So you'll see we're showing some hatches. We're proposing to dead end those connections with the mobility corridor. And Rodman Road would be a realigned to this intersection to the left on the view. But the mobility corridor is consistent with what we've described before. 2 lanes heading northbound coming out of the signalized intersection that will stay for 1,500 feet and then taper to 1. You have 1 lane coming in, transitioning to 2 lanes at the intersection in the southbound direction. The mobility, the local street corridor, we have a similar kind of a mirrored theme here where we have for the first 2 blocks, we provide for on-street parking here. We have crosswalks, raised crosswalks with curb extensions. We have bike and pedestrians as separated shared facilities on either side of the street. Once we get past the first 2 blocks, we eliminate the on-street parking and introduce a wider esplanade. The intent here is to design the template so that if there is future development that occurs through the corridor, there's the opportunity with minimal cost to remove the esplanade and introduce on-street parking. All right, we'll continue north. As we continue north, our next intersection is the northern split. This is where, or the connection where the northbound and southbound barrels of Washington Street reconnect. It's also where Brickyard Circle is. So the mobility corridor is similar theme. We mentioned 2 lanes southbound coming out of the signal. You end up having 1 lane coming in northbound into the intersection. The template for the local street is similar to what we just discussed. 1 travel lane in each direction, curbing, wide esplanades, and then separate bike and ped facilities on both sides of the street. Raised crosswalks strategically placed for traffic calming. And then as we get to the intersection with Brickyard Circle, we're proposing our 3rd connection here, signalized intersection between that mobility and that local street. We're providing for full pedestrian and bicycle accommodations around the perimeter. And providing for trail connections, which I think we'll talk about in the next slide here. So the next slide here, this is Brickyard Circle today. This is our Washington Street corridor. This is what we're calling our Northern Boulevard, where both the mobility and the local street are now merging. So we're proposing 2 lanes in each direction, similar to the existing conditions, separated by a landscape median. We do provide for turn lane pockets. We do provide for crossings, mid-block crosswalks with rapid flashing beacons and refuge islands. And then sidewalk on the west side through the corridor, as well as a shared use pathway on the east side or south side of the corridor. You'll see there's a trail here shown, Taylor Brook Trail. I believe this will be under design with the city. It's been approved to build a trail on an existing rail corridor. We'll tie that into this transportation infrastructure, extend it down and have it cross Washington Street, and it could extend to the residential neighborhoods to the west. We are proposing connections on both sides of Brickyard Circle. This will be right in and right out on the northern connection. The benefit of this is for the businesses that exist here, not being able to turn left like they can today. They can't today. They need to use Brickyard to do a U-turn. So they'll use Brickyard Circle and then the signalized intersection to turn around and head back into the city. All right, we're going to continue north here. Continues with our Northern Boulevard, similar footprint, shared use pathway on the east side, sidewalk on the west side, separated facilities for bikes and peds. And then we terminate someplace here at a point close to the Minot Ave Rotary. There is a separate planning study ongoing with the City of Auburn for Minot Ave, including the Rotary itself. And it's actually the same consultant team working on that one. So we will be kind of working both studies to come up with a footprint that works for both studies, and we'll be referencing each study as we can complete it. This study we're hoping to wrap up sooner than the Minot Ave study. The Minot Ave study is just getting started. We're hoping to have our first public meeting maybe in February. All right, a few more slides here to present. We'll stop right here. So this is our Northern Boulevard footprint. Grace, do you want to just describe what we're looking at?
Sure. So it should be pretty familiar from what we looked at in the other Northern Boulevard perspective image. Again, we're in the northbound lane here, got the southbound lane on the left side. We're showing planted medians. The planted median closest to us, that's just next to that white vehicle, is narrower to accommodate that left turning lane into that business over there. But then you can see further down the road, it does widen up again and allow for street trees like we saw on the other perspective. And then on the right side, we've got our median again with street trees, pedestrian scale lighting, and then there's that 10-foot shared use pathway for the bikers and pedestrians.
Awesome. Thank you, Grace. All right, we're now going to transition. We got a few more slides here. We're going to transition to our east-west connection or west-east connection, Rodman Road to Broad Street connection. So this is Rodman Road here today. Connects to Washington Street. So we've flipped our views. So north is up on this graphic. This is our mobility corridor here where my cursor is. This would be our local street corridor here. So Rodman Road, we're proposing to realign a portion of Rodman Road and tie it into Washington Street with two intersections. One with the mobility corridor. This will be a signalized intersection. A lot of truck traffic here. This will be heavily used, particularly this right turn movement coming off of Rodman to go south towards the turnpike. So full access here, proposing a sidewalk on the side, on the north side of Rodman Road, shoulders for bikes through here. As we continue across the signalized intersection, we have a connector here. This would be a brand new road facility connecting to the local street. Always stop at the local street, providing for sidewalks on both sides and bike accommodations. And then we'll continue east, and we'll be crossing and connecting into Broad Street. We'll be crossing the Little Androscoggin. So that will be our next slide. This is continuing east. We have a crossing here with a Little Androscoggin and a straight shot over here to Broad Street. So first the crossing. So here's the Little Androscoggin. Here is an active rail line. We'd be proposing a bridge where those two are very close to each other, so we could span both facilities with one bridge, proposing likely a 3-span bridge through this area to span not only the river, but the railroad tracks. Our roadway template would be 11-foot lanes, 1 lane in each direction, 5-foot shoulders for bikes, and a sidewalk with curbing on the north side of this facility. My last graphic on the concepts is coming full circle back to exit 75. So this is the main turnpike here with exit 75. This is Allied Road, and these are the businesses that exist on Allied Road. We talked about restricting left turn movements here in our previous slides. So if we're going to do that, how are we allowing for vehicles and trucks to access these businesses and turn left? So we actually show 3 different options here. Option 1 would be to provide basically a new Allied Road connector or a driveway that would be opposite exit 75. Exit 75 is a 3-lane or a 3-leg signalized intersection. We would introduce a 4th leg to that signalized intersection. So truck traffic coming out off the turnpike could run straight across to get access to these businesses. trucks leaving these businesses could do straight across to the turnpike. So seems pretty basic. There is a railroad crossing, an at-grade railroad crossing that would be required here. There is also an at-grade railroad crossing on the existing Allied Road corridor. Our second option would be to extend Allied Road to the south and have it tie into Station Road, which gives access to a signalized intersection on Washington Street where Kitty Hawk Ave is located. So that would be our second option. A third option would be to build a Allied Road extension up to Danville Corner Road. They could travel down Danville Corner Road to the new signalized intersection with Washington Street. Of the three options, option 3 is probably our least preferred, but we're still going to assess advantages and disadvantages for options 1 and 2. So with that said, that discusses a lot of our preliminary recommendations and concepts. I'd like to transition to discussing the softer side of this design, the non-transportation side, more land use planning, and looking at future development, future zoning, and how that might be influenced with the transportation infrastructure that we've discussed presently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing here. I'm going to hand it over to Ben, and Ben, I'm going to pull up your slideshow. Let's see here. Slide that over here and share screen. I think if I did it properly, we should see connectivity as a catalyst.
Thank you, Don. I see that up on the screen, and appreciate you running the slides here. So as Don said, I hadn't thought of this as the softer side of the planning effort, but I think that the way I look at it is everything we've really talked about so far is kind of what's happening in the road and what's happening immediately next to the road. And we've got some graphics that we'll share over the next few slides that talk about this placed in a wider context in the city, as well as thinking about what it means to reimagine Washington Street from the perspective of land use. What does that mean for housing, businesses, recreation in Auburn? So one of the things that we've heard throughout this process, and it kind of lines up with things that I think folks are hearing through the ongoing comprehensive planning process that's happening right now, is that this area is a major gateway to the city of Auburn. And people are wanting, there's a strong desire to have the city put their best foot forward and show improvements in landscaping, show improvements in the use of the land, and kind of see a wider diversity of things. So when we talk about unlocking new development potential, that's really what that is, increasing the options that folks have available to them. Making sure that this is the kind of place that people will want to spend time rather than drive through at some of those speeds you saw were, upward of high double digits and a few over 100 miles an hour, which is mind blowing for this section of roadway. And really integrating this part of the city more into the city, and having people think of this as another urban neighborhood, like the very close by New Auburn neighborhood, which is very close but very disconnected from this part of the city. So if you wouldn't mind, Don, the next slide. What we are hoping to show here is a little bit more about how zoning updates, which include what happens on a property, what's allowed and how it happens, how some additional zoning changes around design standards and the form of new development. So as it relates to the types of things that people are using when it comes to the location of buildings on the site, the materials that are used in the buildings, thinking about landscaping and lighting, and a bit more, giving that more priority in the design process. Those two together are really what we think of as the 3 Ds of development. There's the diversity of land uses, there's the density of uses, and design. And all 3 of those elements, all three of those variables are really envisioned for some significant change on that local Washington side of the study area. So in order to make that happen, additional infrastructure work and planning needs to be taking place, as well as thinking more about that placemaking and open space. This is a critical component in helping turn this from a drive-through, get through as fast as you can, to having this local Washington Street become a new neighborhood, a place where people want to spend time, spend money, and live and work. So next, please. Density, diversity, and design. So this is a graphic that will look familiar to some of those things that Grace was showing a few moments ago. I think that I wanted to include this. This is an ALA graphic because it shows more than just those blank walls. I think that those are important for massing and understanding what a streetscape might look like. But this, I think, is sharing some of those key design elements in a bit more realistic way, and helping people understand that this is a place that people are going to be active, spend time, slow down, and be able to get around with a vehicle, certainly, but also have a lot more options when it comes to mobility. So we started by thinking a little bit about what is happening in the vicinity of this study area. The study area is kind of that purple blob in the middle, but there's a lot happening around this area. There's not only a lot of activity and business in the corridor, but there's a lot of existing neighborhoods surrounding this, and there's a lot of industrial and commercial uses. This very important connections to the intermodal facility, the airport. This is the primary lifeline connection between the interstate and the downtown area. So we need to think about all of these things in the context of looking at changes to Washington Street. So next, please. And this is going to look somewhat familiar to folks as you relate it to those earlier drawings that Don shared. This is the graphic that ALA put together as well. It's starting to conceptualize those blobs on the prior slide into pieces that fit together. So rather than thinking about disparate neighborhoods and here's the industrial zone and here's the place where people live, we use this to kind of conceptualize how do these things come together around a new local Washington Street, as well as the potential new neighborhood on the other side of the Little Androscoggin. So Don, maybe as you go to the next slide, we started to conceptualize this project as a reimagining Washington Street. And we've been using kind of the idea here we put forward on the project website is, maybe this is really the Little Androscoggin district, and like it's going to have a new identity. It's going to be focused on the river and as well as focused on local uses and not just that drive-through area. So when we talk about the 3Ds and we talk about a place that people want to be, this is a little bit more detail on what we're talking about. And what we're thinking is redevelopment of underutilized sites. There's a lot of pavement on a lot of these sites associated with industrial, trucking, distribution uses. Those are great uses, and I know they have a home in Auburn, and they will for a long time. But over time, and as folks start to think about other options for their property in the future, they'll have options that include more than just what's there today. And that's going to include places to live, and you can start to see that happening around the project at the northern split. There's been a lot of development already approved kind of around this area, but thinking about how to integrate that with public spaces, particularly the trails and that multimodal path. I'll talk more about that in a moment. So next, please. So this, getting even a little more granular, this is the existing zoning of this part of the city today. And this is not the official zoning map, but it is the zoning layers that the city has. And we wanted to kind of put these at this scale, showing the study area and give people a sense of what's happening. So I think the on the right is downtown. That's Court Street. You can kind of see, and there's the bridge that connects to Lewiston, the Androscoggin Rivers, kind of in the bottom right. And New Auburn is kind of in the center right of the image here. That's in that orange color. Thank you, Don. And you'll notice that there's some of that darker red that extends out Washington Street from downtown, and that where the cursor is currently located is where a number of new residential units have been approved, right at the corner of that split. And from that point all the way out to exit 75 is undifferentiated general business and industrial district. And you'll see on both sides that there's low density suburban zoning and some neighborhood zoning, but this whole area, and I think in part it's maybe a reflection of the existing uses, has been zoned for business and industrial use. So when we think about a change in the roadway and what that might mean for land use options going forward, we move from those conceptual blobs that started to come together. And if you go to the next slide, Don, we came up with something that kind of fits into the existing zoning scheme of the city, utilizes existing zoning districts, and kind of blends Washington Street into the surrounding areas. But Washington Street, and especially kind of in that bullseye, which is where Rodman Road crosses Washington Street, that becomes that downtown core, that new neighborhood center focused on local Washington and Rodman. And that node, and the red that goes around it, is that 2-block area where Don had showed earlier on-street parking, the sidewalk and the multi-use path kind of living together on the edge of the pavement, and those buildings that Grace had illustrated that are closer to the street. And on either side of that, closer to the southern split and the northern split, the uses taper down. And that connection to across the river, there's the green swath right in the middle here that is representing some resource protection. We have another slide I'll talk about in a moment that has some vision for that particular piece. But in addition to the Washington Street work, which is really kind of like this closer term, medium term use, that connection ultimately across would really make it much easier to envision a less dense, more residential focused neighborhood on the other side of the Little Androscoggin, as well as that important connection. Don talked about the bridge, but that would mean a lot for the folks in New Auburn and the southern parts of the city when it comes to connectivity to points north, as well as to exit 75 on the interstate itself. So this idea is meant to help inform the comprehensive planning process. The zoning that will result, I think, is going to be informed as much by the comprehensive plan as this. But I hope our work is going to be an important piece in that discussion going forward. Next slide, please. This slide talks about the trail. I wanted to have just an image here to quickly discuss the what that means as far as this connection. Don had talked about a potential Casco Bay Trail that would connect in Danville all the way to Portland. Well, this multi-use path would connect with an existing planned trail extension with the existing trail that would go into downtown Auburn. So the idea here is that there really is a missing link, just like there's a missing neighborhood almost. There's a missing connection here that I think this project can help tie together the city and the exit 75 area. So I think on the next slide, and maybe before we leave, if we go back, please. The other thing on this image is you'll see on either end, all the way on the left is the park and ride lot over by exit 75, and all the way to the right is the transportation center. You'll notice over by the transportation center side, there's a lot of little dots, like this little measles map of bus stops throughout downtown Auburn and Lewiston. And this is the city bus service. And you will notice that there are 0 bus stops anywhere along this Washington Avenue, Washington Street connection, all the way out to the park and ride. We, in our design work, are going to make sure that there's a space for potential bus stops on the local Washington side. As we talked about options and we talked about mobility, the bus is going to be an important part of that, and being able to get a bus down to the park and ride will help with the existing bus service that goes to Portland and beyond. So I think this is an important not only trail and bike connection, but it's an important transit connection as well. So the next few slides, we saw a preview of these. We can kind of get through these and come back to them if people have questions. But we wanted to reinforce practices, policies, and actions that the city can take, the partnerships that can be made in order to help make this happen. So there's certainly zoning type incentives and requirements that can take place around impact fees, incentive zoning, and brownfield. These are ways that a city like Auburn already is working with businesses and developers in other parts of the city. These need to be adjusted for this neighborhood as well. And if you go down to the next slide, Don, economic development activity can also help with this. We talked about some of these things that it's under the same umbrella. The very last slide that I have is talking about financing tools. Again, these are things that the city needs to do, but the one thing that I want to make sure everyone on this call, and including the city folks here, is that we know that DOT is a very important partner in this process. The regional transportation planning folks are important partners. But additionally, there's a very strong conservation ethic in Auburn, and that's come through in what we've heard around the committees and the committee work that are taking place around these trails. The school and bus advocates are important partners as well. So I think by reaching out and kind of expanding the network of people that are pulling this isn't going to be a DOT project or a public works project. It's a city project. And that kind of network and mindset can assist with making some of these things happen, not only from a money and financing standpoint, but also from policy, zoning, and community support and community space standpoint. So these will be available, and we can pull these up again if people have questions about the softer side of the project as we go forward.
Thank you, Ben. All right. I've got one more slide to share, and then we'll open it up to questions. I'm just going to do this on a, oh, do I still have? Yeah, that's yours. All right. Yeah, this is the last slide. Screen 2. Let's see, share. If I did it correctly, you should see a slide that has schedule. All right, so we'll recap on prior work that we've done. So the first public meeting we had was the beginning of April of last year. So we're getting close to approaching a year since that last meeting. What have we done since then? Over the course of last summer, we worked on the traffic analysis, the land use planning that Ben has discussed, development of these concepts. We've shared that with our client team through regular check-ins. We presented a very similar slideshow to the Auburn City Council in October of last year. And then we did a very similar presentation to Maine DOT partners in November of last year. So since then, we've made some revisions to the concepts that you see here and some discussions on recommendations. That took place December last month and then into this month. We're here tonight for our second public meeting. Where do we go from here? Obviously, we're requesting input and feedback and comments from the public tonight. We'll take that information back. We may be making more revisions to what you've seen here. We're looking to kind of finalize our recommendations, incorporate revisions as needed. We still have to do cost estimates. This will not be a cheap project from a transportation infrastructure standpoint. So we'll pull some cost estimates together. We'll probably do it in phases or sections of roadway so we can kind of break out pieces if there is a funding limitation as this project maybe moves forward into an implementation phase. So we'd like to work on those items as well as preparing a draft report next month. And then based on input and feedback, we'd come back with a final report a month later in March. So in theory, we're looking to wrap up this study in the next few months. And like I said, we're here tonight to present where we are with the information and preliminary recommendations and then open it up to questions. So I think that completes our slideshow. I will stop sharing and I'll give the floor back to Eric to see if maybe he has any comments through the chat room or questions.
Thank you, Don. Don, Ben, and Grace, thank you. We are open to questions. We have one in the Q&A, and then I think for anybody who wants to do that, if you hover over the screen, you can click on the Q&A and type in a question, or you can click on the raise your hand icon, and I can let people in to speak as in the order that they raise their hand. The first question in the Q&A is, I love the idea of separating the two types of traffic as you've done. Was there consideration given to having the cycling on the commuter portion rather than the more residential portion? Something similar to the Greenway between Brunswick and Bath. It would allow a more scenic ride with likely fewer interruptions. I know I hadn't thought of that, but happy to hear any thoughts that you may have.
Yeah, Eric, from our study team's perspective, I don't think that question or comment came up at all through the current progress of our study. It's a good comment. I think of Brunswick and Route 1 in Brunswick. There's a separated facility that runs parallel with what I consider kind of more of a limited access interstate system, also parallel with the river there in Topsom, Brunswick. So I think it's a good comment. No, we have not considered it. Our thought behind where we located it was to try to provide that pedestrian access to that local street corridor to access the businesses and restaurants and the things that may exist there, both now and in the future. So we wanted to provide that connection and really a complete streets facility for that local street. Low speed, accommodate all modes of transportation, including bikes. Now, with that said, could there be a separated mobility facility for bikes along the mobility corridor? I'm sure that could be something for consideration.
I think you mentioned it, Don, but I think one of the other big differences between this corridor and Brunswick is that the mobility corridor in Brunswick is along the river, and I think they tried to highlight that. Our local street will be backing up to the river in this case. Another Q&A question: is there concern with the on-street parking in the mobility corridor obstructing pedestrian views as they cross the street? I think the on-street parking is in the local street corridor as currently proposed. And it says, I know, for example, on Court Street, visibility of the crosswalks is especially difficult on the street, but with the on-street parking.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. There are setback requirements for crosswalks and on-street parking. So we would look to adhere to those requirements. I also will share that most of those crosswalks we're proposing curb extensions. So we eliminate the parking stalls and we pull the curb lines in. So the pedestrian crossing that's at grade with the vehicles is a shorter distance. So they should be more visible. Also, it will be elevated crosswalks on the local street. So I think it's a good question. We would adhere to whatever standards we need to follow when designing crosswalks with on-street parking.
So far, there are no raised hands. I know on my screen, anyways, if you move your cursor onto the screen where you can see Don, Ben, Grace, and I, it opens up some options at the bottom of the screen. Raise hand is one of them, and Q&A is the other. So give people a minute, I guess, to sort through that. Grace, your hand is raised.
Sorry, I clicked the button by accident.
She was testing it out.
Yeah.
It works. We have 32 participants.
Awesome.
Have for the majority of the meeting.
Hopefully what they've heard, they're satisfied. If they're not asking questions, hopefully what they've heard, they're satisfied with and maybe excited about what the future might entail.
I do have one hand raised, Atiana Blevins, and bringing her in to ask the question.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. I'm Aitana. I'm here on behalf of the Casco Bay Trail Alliance. I'm part of the board, and like you guys mentioned, yes, we're still working our way to get to that Danville Junction and finding a way to connect towards Allied Road. I just had a quick question about where you mentioned the park and ride would be. I think that's a very cool place to think about where it would go. I'm so happy to imagine this area being somewhere that you'd want to park and hang out and even enjoy, because right now I very rarely even use the exit 75 parking ride to take the bus. I'd rather take the bus from near Bates College. Were there any other considerations to where to put this park and ride though? I just wanted to hear other ideas where that could have been.
As it relates to the shared use pathway, our objective was to provide a separated bike facility or shared use pathway facility within our study limits. So we started kind of at Allied in the park and ride, and we had some discussion, should this pathway be on the east side or the west side of the corridor? Park and ride's on the west side, but the east side provides more of a direct connection to Danville Junction in the future. So there were some city officials that were pretty vocal that we should put this pathway on the east side to provide for easier connection there. As we get to the northern end, we also have that Taylor Brook Trail that the city is working on, that initiative. And as Ben had said, that goes right into the city. So that also would be on the east side. So those are some of the thoughts we put into it. I originally thought the park and ride would be a good terminal point for a shared use pathway, not understanding that the Casco Bay Trail may be coming in the future. So the park and ride lot was more of an afterthought that we said, okay, we feel it's best suited to put the trail on the east side. But we saw this opportunity with the park and ride lot, and we said there could be people that will travel there, park their vehicle, and try to access the trails from that location. So we made sure we provided a trail network to get to the trail on the east side. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, that answers it. I was thinking oh, what a great coincidence, but I wanted to make sure it's not a coincidence. You guys are thinking of that. So thank you. Very thoughtful. And I love the presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. We do have a few more questions coming in on the question and answer. Will there be any relocation of any businesses or residents? I think that there is the possibility of that over time. The industrial uses along the corridor have some challenges with how people view the city coming in. They're older, long-standing uses. That is a possibility. I think we would work with property owners on over a fairly long period of time, probably more than a generation, to address that. But that is a possibility. And has there been feedback from current business owners and/or residents along the corridor on this version of the study? I can answer that, Don. I know we have reached out to a number of the businesses along the corridor and had conversations, especially those that have potential impacts from transportation changes. But we would love to talk to any other business owners if we've missed anybody, and continue those conversations over time. I think there's an opportunity for all of the business owners and residents along that corridor to see improved access, safer access, and potentially more property value over time with some of these proposed changes. The next one is, would sewer and water extension on Broad Street be a federal funded project or accomplished via TIFs? And we have requested a congressional delegated spending project that would extend water and sewer in South Auburn. It's still to be determined what that would look like on Broad Street versus South Main Street and Vickery Road. I think there is high likelihood, even if we get that funding, that we can't extend it as far as maybe we would like to initially. I think this is a long-term project, but I think there could be some combination of federal or state funding as well as tax increment financing to achieve that over time. The tax increment financing really depends on people investing in that corridor to create the revenues. They don't exist unless people invest and create new taxable revenue that could be used for further extensions. But that's a long-term conversation that we'll have to have with the city council over time. And the last one from Elaine is great info. Thank you. And it looks like there are a couple more now. Sharon asking, how are you going to attract business if you are looking to get there with the existing businesses here presently? Salvage yards, truck companies, warehouses, trailer parks. I think that this gateway, and we've heard this a lot, whether it's in the comprehensive planning process, this public engagement process, prior comprehensive plans, we've heard this for a long time, that the corridor is not attractive in its current condition. And I think it's trying to meet high-speed transportation needs at the same time that it's trying to meet school buses picking up kids at residences, or trash trucks, solid waste pickup along the side of the road with people going 50 plus miles an hour, and in a lot of cases over 60 miles an hour. I think we're really trying to address that as part of this study with some of the land use changes, but that is a big challenge. It's not our best foot forward as far as a corridor. When you get off at exit 75 and travel into Auburn, it's not the best image that we present as our gateway.
Can I add a comment to that, Eric? I think part of this study is providing for that future infrastructure that would draw those businesses. So providing the sidewalk, providing the street parking, providing the better roadway that's going to allow businesses like that to start to fill in. Without that infrastructure, it makes it harder for those businesses you're looking to attract to fill in these spaces. So it's definitely a long-term process, but it's starting to put the pieces together to allow for that development to happen.
Thank you for that. I think that is the goal, is to create an environment where property values are increased and there can be a transition to other uses that are more conducive to a walkable local street. And then we have two more now. One more Q&A. My concerns resolve around the business side that this affects, since you are going through a business property. to extend Rodman. Also, the city has a hard time keeping the existing sidewalks clear, so I feel that this would just add to that problem. It's a good comment. We are challenged to keep up with sidewalk maintenance, and we will have to work with a number of property owners to kind of phase this over a long period of time. But we'll continue to connect with those property owners. And part of the goal of this is to really create new taxable value that can share the costs of better maintenance along the corridors that are higher density and higher value that can really help support that without impacting the existing taxpayer. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to that.
That's good. Ben?
I was just gonna mention that, as some of these uses change, it can be hard to envision, 300 or 400 feet of sidewalk in front of a big empty parking area right now. But I think it's a lot easier to imagine a couple hundred feet of sidewalk in front of, 50 or 60 apartment buildings, units in an apartment building. And that's the kind of thing that we're envisioning, at least in that core area, maybe not throughout the entire study area, but an earlier point too is, right now, Washington Street, US 202, and it's really focused on moving traffic and through the area. And there's always been this tension, I believe, since it became this kind of divided roadway. Like, how do you accommodate the people who live here and work here? And over time, people got used to this condition of cutting through, and it's very much like an interstate, like Don said. So I think the premise here underlying the recommendations that you've seen is like having one side of this road continue to serve that mobility function, and being able to safely move people efficiently, quickly between the interstate and downtown, and kind of getting that old Washington Street back, kind of reclaiming that for the community. And it, over time, and maybe Eric is right to think about this as, what is the next generation going to look like, and not, the next couple city budgets. I think there's a lot of opportunity in this place, and I think this plan provides the vision for it. But I also, final thought is, as we phase this, there are some things that could be happening in kind of the shorter, medium term that would make some real improvements in that kind of time frame too.
Thank you. We have one more hand raised from Emily. I'm going to bring her in.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Emily Paskowitz. I'm the Northern New England manager with the East Coast Greenway Alliance. So the Casco Bay Trails route is part of our route through the state of Maine. So my role is to look at sort of regional and multi-state trail connections in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. But I'm based in Brunswick, so this is, close enough that it's kind of exciting to see all of this coming together. So first of all, just wanted to thank and, congratulate the entire study team. This is a really amazing visioning plan with a surprising amount of detail, given like the size of the study area you're looking at, which is really great to see. And I think it's the kind of like comprehensive vision that this area deserves. So lots to dig into here, but just two things I'll mention for now. Kind of piggybacking off of what Aitana was mentioning about like where the shared use path and bike and pedestrian facilities end. I think the park and ride is a super logical place, given, the scope and what the study area is looking at. I was wondering if there was any consideration given to, given that like there was some looking at kind of like what could be done with vehicular traffic around Allied Road, like on that one slide. Like even if it's sort of maybe on-road connections along Station Road or Danville Corner Road, just something that looks at how, that those bike and ped facilities may eventually connect south towards where the proposed Casco Bay Trail on rail line would end. So curious about that, and just, mentioning that that would be nice to see somewhere in this plan. And then just the other thing I wanted to ask about, I know that 10 feet was sort of the proposed width for most of the shared use paths that I noticed. That's obviously a great starting point, but I know more and more communities are moving towards like more of an 11 to 12-foot standard, particularly given how popular these facilities tend to get once they are in place and starting to get used, and how you can eventually end up with conflicts between cyclists and pedestrian non-cyclist users. So just wanted to ask about those two things and see if they had been considered.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Great questions, Emily. So I'll share with you on the pathway width. Yes, ideally it's 12 feet. We in our design experiences, we typically have limited right-of-way space, and so
Hmm.
we would reduce that down to 10 feet. We feel 10 feet is our minimum acceptable width for a shared use pathway. I know in constrained areas we can go to 8 feet, but so we've just been proposing 12. I think if we have the right-of-way space for it, I would agree with you. We've just been proposing 10 feet, but I agree with you. If we have right-of-way space available, 12 feet would probably be a better solution. So we can take a look at that. I think on the local street corridor, we might have limitations on right-of-way
Hmm.
space. And we actually, in the urban section, we transitioned to actually separate cycle lanes, parallel with the sidewalks in that area. So, but I think we're right up to the right-of-way width in that zone. But on the outer, on the periphery, we could certainly take a look at, is there opportunities to have a wider path through there? And then to answer the question from the park and ride, I guess down to Kitty Hawk, did we consider some form of bicycle accommodations? And the answer is no, we didn't. Should we have possibly? But our study limits were really starting at Allied, so we focused on Allied North because we were making improvements or revisions to the entrance at Allied Road. We were obligated to extend our limits south for that connection of Allied with full access, but we haven't considered bike improvements. That exit 75 intersections is going to be pretty gnarly for bike
Hmm.
traffic unless it's a separated facility. So we have noted on our plans that the intent for our pathway where it terminates at Allied Road would be a future connection to Danville Junction, separate from this study is kind of how we've indicated it. But if there's an interim situation that may occur, maybe they can use the Allied Road for bike accommodations, get them off the Route 202 section to get them down to Station Road, maybe as a possibility. But I think that would require input from the city and others as to what that might be. So hopefully Casco Bay Trail happens first. We didn't really talk about a schedule for implementation. I mean, this is a pretty grand planning study. It's going to be quite expensive for implementation. So we would finish the report and document costs associated with this work. And then the next phases are, is it supported locally by the public? Is it supported locally by the city officials? Is it supported by DOT? If we can get yes, yes, and yes on those three items, then the city and the DOT can partner to try to leverage maybe federal funds via a raised grant or some other form to pay for a portion or all of the recommendations of this study. Timing of that is minimum 3 to 5 years to get something to the point where it's being designed for construction implementation. So that would be on an early schedule. I think on a project of this size, it could be a longer duration before you see implementation. So I say that because Casco Bay Trails may be implemented and built first before some of the recommendations of this study are actually implemented. So, and you may find that knowing that those two are moving forward in design, that there's funding maybe at a state or a local level to fund that connecting piece, that missing piece that we'll have.
Yeah, absolutely. And totally understand that both with sort of the timeline that this sort of study is looking at and the scope. And yeah, that's good to hear. And I think even with the scope of this study, like, a crossing somewhere to access south or something that acknowledges that like this may be something that needs to be examined in the future would be plenty. So yeah, thank you for all your hard work. Great job,
Thank
everyone.
you. Yep, and we'll note this conversation in the report when we put it together, this discussion.
We have a couple more on the Q&A. Where are you going to find space on the northern end of Washington Street where houses are 15 or 20 feet from the road now? I know it does narrow up as we get towards the Rotary. I don't think we're proposing any expansion of that right away in that area.
Correct. Yeah, the goal is to try to fit this roadway footprint within the available right of way that we have through there. So when we develop costs for this project, one aspect we'll look at as well is right of way costs. So it won't be just construction costs. There'll be engineering costs, there'll be right of way costs and inspection costs that we'll put together for this report. When we do the right of way costs, we'll take a harder look at where areas where it may be tight, where we feel houses are closer to the road. We would document that in our right-of-way assessment. But our goal is to minimize right-of-way impacts, if at all possible. A comment from one of the audience members earlier was, okay, our Rodman Road connector to Broad Street does run across private property, and yes, it does, and that would be a property impact that or impacts that we would work with the city to work with those property owners with on how those impacts affect them and what the next steps might be.
The next question is from an anonymous attendee. How much has this study cost the city? I don't have the exact numbers right in front of me. We did put in through a competitive process through Androscoggin Transportation Resource Center to access federal planning funds. So a majority of the study, the transportation piece, is paid for through those funds through our municipal planning organization. And then we also added on some additional work, especially with North Star for the land use planning piece. But we can get those numbers onto the website. Couple more coming in. I'm alarmed to hear of the consideration of a connector with Danville Corner Road to Allied. Very unwise, narrow road, too much traffic already, as well as 65 new housing units going in. Bad idea. I know, Don, you mentioned that was a third option, not the preferred one. I don't know what else you'd like to add to that.
It won't be part of the final recommendations. So we wanted to showcase what options do we have in play. Option 1 or 2 will be our preferred option, probably option 1, that provides a direct connection right opposite exit 75.
Brad chimed in the transportation piece of this, there's zero cost directly to the city through ATRC. And like I mentioned, we had a little bit of an add-on for the land use planning piece, but that'll help inform the comp plan as well. Ron Lavasser, on Brickyard Circle, that new housing complex being put in with the traffic to come out on Rodman Road, and roads also come out onto Bennett Ave, leading out to Poland Road. We do have a new housing complex going in off of Brickyard Circle. It's 96 housing units. There are some traffic improvements associated with that development to allow for left turns into it. It will put some additional traffic, but I think the 96 units of housing compared to the base sort of traffic flows along Washington Street are relatively small. And please post the website we're referring to. If you go to the City of Auburn website, auburnmaine.gov, and search Washington Street, you should be able to find it. And I think the actual web address, I believe, is Little Andro Gateway. I don't know, Ben or Don, if you recall.
Ben's going to look it up for us.
I only have one screen right now where I am, so it's hard for me to look something else up.
Well, we're looking.
Yeah, I was trying to post it in the chat. It's littleandrogateway.com is the project team website for this, and there are links to that from the city website. Littleandrogateway.com.
Thank you, Ben. As of right now, we don't have any remaining questions, either as hands raised or Q&As. Well, thank you. I appreciate the work of the study team, and it's a major project, but it's also a transformational project, I think, that could take a long time, but it could reclaim Washington Street North as a place for people that it hasn't been for quite a while. And I'll just mention that Washington Street South, when it was built, was intended to have two-way traffic within the right-of-way that they acquired, but they never built it, and that was in I think the late 50s when that was built. So if nothing else for Q&A or raised hands, I think we're wrapping up.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you. Have a good night.